call roll. I'll make sure we've got our speakers squared away, but they're not on for just a few more minutes anyway, so I'll get emailing them and get them rolling in here.
Okay, it is, according to my computer, 10 a.m. on the 29th of January. I want to call our meeting to order. I want to thank everybody for coming. We've got 29 days in this new year, and it always feels like it's almost gone. I don't know if you other guys feel like that, but it's a different world right now, and hopefully get better. Let's start our roll call, and I'm going to start with the list I have. If you're here, just say here, whatever. Gary Bassinger.
Here.
Okay. Chad Burt. Chad Burt. Dane Carlson.
Here.
Looking good with that shirt, Dane.
Thank you.
Michael Ferdinand. Diana Grobe. Carlos Guzman. Jimmy Henry.
Here.
Jimmy Henry's here? Okay.
Yes.
Got you. John Isom.
Here.
Jake Kelly.
Here.
Mayor Jackson. I see you're here.
I'm here, sir.
Frank Jordan. Garrett McLeod.
Here.
Marlon Mitchell. Wendell Knoll. Chad Odom. Charles Rogers. Mike Rozelle is here. Jessica Russell. Daniela Schreiner.
Here.
Or Danielle Schreiner, sorry, Danielle. BJ
That's okay.
Simon. BJ Simon.
Here.
Gwen Tillison. Andrew Van Chow.
Present.
All right, you're looking dapper today, young man. Mike
Thank you,
Walker.
sir.
Mike Walker. Brandon Willis.
I'm here.
Okay. Annie Yang. Vince Yoakum.
Here.
Okay. Headphones. I like that. Nick Finan. Nick's not here. And with that, I would like to say welcome to two new members. We have Garrett McLeod and who was the other one? Was it Jake Kelly?
That's
Somehow
correct.
it was Jake Kelly, new members. Okay. Would like to
Yes,
welcome both of you guys. If you have any questions, you can contact Jessica or contact me. I mean, Jillian, or contact me, or you can contact the H-GAC. And also like to say thank you to Nick Finan. I know he's not on here, but he served many years with this, and guys that work with Nick closer, give him a call and tell him appreciate his service. With that, let's go into item number 3, our public comment. And do we have anybody signed up, Jillian, to speak?
So far, I have not heard from anyone.
Okay. Now let's move on into item number 4, action item, approve the minutes from October 2nd, 2020 GC board meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, those in, let's do it this way. If I'm going to call for those that's against the motion, if there's none, then we're just going to approve it. So anyone against the motion? Okay, motion approved. Item number 5, action item, approve financial reports. I have a question. I don't know if we have our financial people on yet about one of our line items from October the 2nd. October the 2nd on City of Liberty, it shows that the balance remaining is $382,102.07. On our financial report today, that it shows that there was a payment made of $117,769.07, which in my math would show there should be a balance left of $264,333. Our report today shows a balance of $375,212.93. I just wondered, Jillian, are our guys on here yet?
I see Isaac Perez. Isaac, I don't know if you can speak to that particular loan in the portfolio, or if there was maybe any interim transaction activity that may lead to those things not adding up, or any information you might be able to provide on that. Or I don't see Omar on here yet, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I came in at the tail end of the question. Which loan are we looking at?
Look at City of Liberty. It shows that in October, they had a balance of 375, 212, 93. And on, and it showed that they had made that payment of 117, 769 to get to that balance. Excuse me, they had made a, let's go back to October. They'd made a payment of 110, 879, 93, left a balance of 382, 102.07. Today's report shows that they made a payment of 117, 769.07, and it shows their balance is 375, 212, 93 cents. That doesn't jive with their last balance. It looks like their balance should be 264, 333, unless there's something else that you guys know that we don't on the report, just looking at the report.
Gotcha. No, so this is the report that I get as well. And so I'm assuming it's the latest one, Jillian, that we've received from our finance department. So I would have to do a deep dive and see kind of where those numbers came from. But so besides not being able to answer that actual question, I do know that they do show as current. And so I'll just have to get that information, and I can definitely gather that for y'all.
Well, two ways we can do this. I would accept a motion to approve with just getting straightened out, or we can just wait till maybe Jillian, will someone else be on before the end of the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we can come back to it. I mean, one of the things I wonder is if there was some kind of capitalization of interest that may have happened, something simple like that, because this shows just the payment side and not anything on the interest side. Maybe there's just a more complete report that we can review the next time around, because we get this directly from our finance department. And I leave it up to you all. I mean, I do think it's, it's a point of order. It just means we can come back to it again. There's also, I think, some more information that'll be coming out next report anyway. So I mean, I'm open to however you all want to do it. If you'd like to go ahead and approve pending a more thorough assessment next quarterly meeting, and just assuming that this is still on the up and up, but I would assume that there's a fairly simple explanation for it, but I truly leave it in y'all's hands, whatever y'all feel comfortable with.
Okay, I think that you're correct there. And I would sure open at, comments from someone else or suggestions. I don't have a problem with approving it with the finance department sending us all, an email explaining
Okay.
that. So that would be, I guess, with that, I just lost my train of thought with the word that means. It's not an amendment, but with that, if they'll just come back, it'll be approved subject to either correcting it or explaining it. But I'd like to have that back to us today, if possible, today or, first this next week. I don't want to wait till the next meeting in April.
Sure. I'm sure I can get with Sean. Isaac, let's collaborate on that. Make sure we get an update email on this particular item by first of the week.
Great. Does anyone else have a comment on this?
I just see on the chat box, Joshua Owens says that he motions to approve with an explanation.
Okay. Do we have a second?
A second, Judge.
Okay. Those against the motion? I hear none. Motion passes. All right.
Judge?
Yes, sir. I mean, yes, ma'am.
No, that's good. I just, I did want to call some attention to the,
I'm sorry.
No, yeah, no, that's all good. So I did want to mention to everyone on the GCEDD financial report. This is the final report for our 2018 to 2021 Planning and Technical Assistance Grant. We operate a couple other grants at times of disasters, which are not part of this report, but this will be the final closeout of the previous 3 years operating budget. So the next round will be of our newly sort of awarded grant, same category, but it just rolls over every 3 years. So what this sort of denotes is what end of day it sort of cost the agency in terms of, our grant award being, the total of 262,000, and that includes our match funds. So I have supplementary reports if anybody wants to have a look at that, because it includes, the match funds and what the federal grant award is, but this is just a summary report for y'all. So if there's anyone that's interested in any of that, just let me know. I'm happy to share it, but we'll be rolling into a new sort of funding cycle on that EDA grant moving forward.
Okay. Any questions, comments? If not, are we ready for Tom Stephenson's presentation? Item number 6.
Yeah, I think we are good to get started on our speakers. So I'm just going to pan down to their bios, and then Tom, you're welcome to start sharing just a moment. Tom Stephenson, I think you all heard from him a couple years ago. He's with Connected Nation. He's located in Michigan and works closely with their state programs, but is also one of the technology advisors for Connected Nation in Texas, or I think it's called Connected Texas. And so he's been our sort of lead technician in our work with Liberty and Walker counties, as well as Wharton, that's still in a survey stage. And so he's just given us an update on that. And then I asked him, just with his expertise on a lot of these federal programs, to also speak to what the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or some folks refer to it as the FCC RDOF. So he's going to jump in and give us a sort of overview on that. And then we'll pan into our next speaker, Juliana Garazar, and I'll introduce her there. And then I invite you all to save your questions for both presentations at the end, once they're all completed. And
Hey, Julian, you might want to check your battery.
Oh, on my computer. Oh, thank you so much for looking out. Good looking out, Vince. Appreciate it. All right, so Tom, it's all you.
Okay, can you, let's see here. Do you see this?
I can see that. It's not in presentation mode, but that's up to you. I don't know if you're using 2 screens. I see your cover presentation.
Just went away. I'm on full gallery now.
I feel like that's a little on the nose to lose the broadband guy, probably due to a connectivity problem. He's still showing up. Can you
hear me now? There you go.
I can hear you now. Yes.
I
Thanks, Tom.
hear you, but
I don't know what happened, but let's see.
I think you just need to try to share your screen again. If not, I have all your slides backed up if you want me to switch to that.
Oh, I have a better presentation.
Okay.
And I'll send it out to you. I'm trying to get this to share, open up. And let me get this out of the way. Slideshow. Come on. There we go. So quickly, I won't get too much into the weeds on who Connected Nation is. Basically, we're a nonprofit. We've been working with broadband issues for a couple of decades now. I've been with the organization for a decade, full decade. And we work with over 400 communities now, developing technology action plans, do a lot of network mapping, validation analysis, residential business technology research, state and local national policy analysis, and capacity building. And what we've been doing here in Liberty, Walker, and Wharton County is community technology planning. Recently, a couple of years ago, the Texas Rural Funders reinvigorated the Connected Texas program to help work with communities and rural Texas to basically help improve the access and expand online education, training, create telework and jobs. And you can see this. Basically, we do the same thing here in Texas right now, the mapping. The mapping in Texas, as you know, FCC mapping is terrible. So the funders have asked us to start the slow process of working, remapping all the broadband in the state every 6 months, come up with a series of maps, but also we're putting people in the field to validate some of the issues and correct it. Doing statewide outreach, education, and community technology. Real quickly, before I get into too deep into the weeds about broadband, when I first started 10 years ago, everybody was happy. The standard was 3 megs down and 1 meg up broadband speeds. Everybody wanted that. A couple years ago, about 5 years ago, they launched the Connect America program, and they thought 10 by 1 would be the standard. Technology, broadband, demand on the broadband is increasing about 11-12% a month. So the technology is quickly changing. The minimum standard right now for a lot of the funding programs is 25 megs down and 3 megs up. And I'll go through this. It's pretty much pretty well outdated, becoming outdated quickly. The new gold standard is going to be gigabit service, and you can see what you can do with gigabit service. A lot of the Council of Governments and groups, I will say, like to copy this program and put it on their website as an educational piece. Feel free to use this. Here's the other explanation. We talk about broadband. I'll get into this. We talk about fixed wireless. We talk about fixed terrestrial broadband, which would be the cable, the underground cable, the coax, such as Charter, Comcast, DSL, which is the hybrid, the old copper lines that are currently fed by fiber. And the new gold standard is fiber optics. In rural areas, we see a lot of fixed wireless. And in some cases, because of the lack of residents in the area, the tough business cases, fixed wireless is sometimes currently right now probably one of the better solutions to get broadband out there. The other one, what they call mobile broadband or non-fixed, which we'll get into in a minute, we considered satellite and mobile. That's where people using working off their cell phones, their data plans, hotspots in the home. Quickly, we look at things, access, adoption, and use. Most of the people are worried about access to broadband right now, especially during COVID. What the providers are concerned with is how it's adopted, the level of adoption, and how it's used in the communities. So supply and demand, the chicken and the egg. It's tough for a provider to come into a community when there's spending millions of dollars, when they know the adoption rate is low in use. So what we try to do with our program is show that perception, trying to change that perception and work with those providers to let them know that demand is high and it's increasing every day. This is something when I'm working with, I know Jimmy's here, Jimmy Henry, working with Jimmy, I'm working with Liberty, Wharton County. The big thing is getting broadband out to the students and devices. Recently, the governor's office has launched Operation Connectivity. And you can see right here, they're going to take the initial $200 million in COVID relief and put that into purchasing broadband connectivity and also devices. So their goal, it's a big goal, but they want to do they want to connect all the students by 2021-22 school year. So like I said, talking to Jimmy, when I was working with Jimmy, that was his #1 concern, and that's been echoed throughout all of Texas and Michigan where I work. So this is a mapping program we want to talk about real quick. The maps are terrible. FCC, the validation, there's not much in the way of validation. We've launched several programs, federal programs, both the FCC, the Reconnect, and there's a lot of holes, a lot of areas that should have received funding that did not receive funding. And so one of the ways we do this is and you have this right here, if you've got an area that says I'm connected by X provider, you can fill the form out, send it in. The data team, we put people in the field to try to correct those areas by census block at a time. Basically, the current data, the way things are done, if a provider provides service to one customer in a single census block, they get to count the entire census block. So we're working with we've been working with the FCC and the federal government on this policy since 2015 to try to correct this. and we finally got a solution. Congress moves slow. I think we all know that. And so finally they passed a recent law, and I'll get into that. I know we talked about, Julian was talking about, she was looking at Liberty County. I got Jimmy here too. This is the map of Liberty County coverage at 100 megs down and 10 megs up. According to the FCC data that we look at, roughly 11,000 households are unserved or underserved in this community. I would dare believe, knowing what I know about the data collected, that I believe that number is higher. I would not. And so one of our missions is to go through slowly but surely, putting field engineers in the town and correct these maps so that and get this information out there. So for opportunities. So what is connected? The planning. We come in, we work with community teams, help them create a community broadband team, basically also a point of contact. We like to bring the providers in so that they know who that point of contact is. So kind of help the community get their arms around it. We do a broadband assessment. For the most part, the funders, we're doing a survey, a broadband survey. I'll get into that in a minute. Once we collect that data, we do some broadband action planning and project implementation. Our GSI team, you might hear, there have been some communities, they want to throw a little extra. They want to know where the fiber's at. That's not covered by the rural Texas funders. And so we do have some engineering teams that we can put in the field that can help complement this and actually look at what the infrastructure is, and in some cases help look at those areas that are falsely claimed to be covered. So project, so here we are. This is what we're doing right now. We're working to help develop the community households, develop an interactive map, and integrate the broadband coverage. We put all this on a map. I've got a short sample of that for Liberty County I'm showing. And also we have a series of recommended actions. Right now with Jimmy, with Walker County, and also Liberty County, we're in the process of working on those recommended actions, kind of do a priority. For my last meetings, we kind of want to wait till the RDOF. I'll get into that, and those providers kind of look at what they're going to be doing. They're currently in I'll get into this, but they're currently into what we call a quiet period or gag period until all the contracts are signed. We put together a tailored action. We tailor a tailored county, action plan, and then a policy. We continue with our policy and research support. And basically, once you get on our mailing list, you'll be notified of all the new recent funding programs that are coming about and happening. So this is it. So when we do the survey, this is Walker. We have a portal. We create a community portal. We've had a little issue with the portal. I'll gladly admit that. The people putting it together were up in Columbus, Ohio, and they got racked up with COVID, and they had a lot of issues. And so we're pretty much working our way through it, but it is working out pretty good, and hopefully we'll have all the irons out of this. This is kind of a new thing for us, what I call Connected 3.0. Liberty County project. This was Liberty County. They finished theirs up this summer or this fall. And you can see what we tried to do is we tried to get about 10% of the businesses, 10% of the households. And we don't necessarily have to hit everybody. You want to notice on here healthcare. Right now, it's kind of hard to get the healthcare community. They're pretty busy right now. They got their hands full. So getting them to respond to a survey. Some of the schools, these are the buildings, but a lot of times the ISDs will fill out, they had responses. Some of these responses, they're for like 5 or 6 buildings. So this was kind of Liberty County, they did well. We had almost 100% of the buildings were covered by it. This is Walker County, Jimmy's team. And you can see Jimmy and his team, they knocked it out of the park. They had 152%. They did a great job. Also 140%, 144% total. So even during COVID, we've had really good luck. Wharton, I believe Josh is down there now. Wharton is trying to finish theirs up at the moment. We've hired a new CTA.
There, the opportunities that there are for new businesses to come in and
Pardon me, if everyone would mind please muting their lines while the presenters are live, we would really appreciate that.
Thank you. So quickly, Liberty, once it's done, this is Liberty County. You can see what we do is the information is automatically crunched. We compare this with a lot of the other data that we're collecting. I'll get into that in a minute. You can see, since we didn't collect enough data for healthcare, we grade this out. So there's not much there. In addition, once the survey is over, we flip a switch, and now we tell the portal, the software, to crunch the data. And we've collected over almost 90,000 broadband surveys. And during the COVID period, we're seeing a lot of changes. I'm going to show you what our world's changed. I got a couple examples of it that also tie in with our recommended actions. With the world's changed, but you can see what we do is we put together a quick summary, a 12-page summary. We have an interactive map right here, and then we put the solutions. Right now, both Walker and Liberty, we're looking at these solutions and trying to figure out what's your priorities, what you want to make as your priorities. Again, we work with those communities. Liberty County, this is the broadband adoption. A lot of people say, well, if you don't have access to internet, how are you going to take a survey? This is the adoption rate. There's about 34% of the people in Texas do not adopt broadband. I didn't get in. And so you can see, but they always find access to broadband. And as you can see here right now, we compare what the other communities are doing. And recently, I would say during COVID, we probably collected 30,000 surveys, residential business surveys. And what it does is our portal takes and crunches the most recent surveys, most recent batch, which most of it has been collected during COVID. So it's very representative of what is happening right now on the ground and what's been happening and how our lives are changing due to COVID. So this is Liberty County. As you can see, only about half the folks in Liberty County have access to a fixed, which is cable, DSL, fiber, if there's any fiber at all there. Another 20% actually rely on the satellite or their mobile hotspots. And then here you see roughly 30% don't adopt. I'm not going to get into all the slides. I could probably spend a half hour in each section, but I'm not going to do that. I want to try to get this, leave time for questions and answers, but you can see about 30% aren't adopting, and we look into why. And right now, recently, it's the lack of access to broadband, but it's also cost. Cost is becoming an issue, especially as we're getting the build out. There's still what we call the digital divide. So once we get it built out, we still have to figure out that part of the population that's being left out. This is something here that's really, I like to point out how things have changed during COVID. Here is the comparison of Liberty County. This is the buying habits of your residential population. This is non-local businesses. So this is where you're seeing people going online and buying from, say, Amazon, Wayfair, and things like that. This number right here is at about 20%. Pre-COVID, this was up to about 25%. And this is where folks are buying local in the communities. Like I said, we've got a lot of COVID information. There's a lot of loyalty to the local businesses. You can see pre-COVID, this number here, which is roughly around 38%, would have been around 20. It always lagged behind folks. This is where folks are trying to buy and purchase local online. So this is a phenomenon we're seeing. A lot of support your local businesses, and we're seeing this online now. So it, like I said before, a year ago, this number here, this bar would have been up here at 25%, and this bar would have been sitting at 20%. So things are changing, life's changing out there. And so this is something where we're looking at, one of our recommended actions is to keep continuing with the website and social media workshops for the local businesses, the chambers. And we also look at some of the other things that are going on, like how are people interacting? What are they using now? Instagram, Twitter, things like that. Twitter's really taken off, a lot of texting now and a lot of video conferencing. Again, it's on the portal. in the business section of how the buying habits and how people are using social media. We dive really deep. Another one that's really changing here is the teleworking. And this is with COVID. In the past, you're looking at what percentage of the population is now teleworking, either yes or no. In the previous, before COVID, this number would have been in the in the 40s, basically. But now you're seeing it up into almost people are working from home. Then we break it down either daily, weekly. If you dive deeper, a lot of problems with the people with teleworking is the lack of access to broadband or good, reliable broadband. It's either too slow or unreliable in most cases in this county. So that's what's kind of really hindering the teleworking community in Liberty County. Again, we have the interactive map. This is something that this is a really good tool that the providers look. We gather up the information. We put the dots. We put that data, the key marketing data, on the map. We overlay it. This happens to be the recent RDOF auction. These are the areas that were given out or were awarded in Liberty County that qualified for RDOF, which I'll get into in a second. And what I'm showing here is a couple of key questions they want to know. What kind of service do they have? Also, do you have a home broadband? You know, these are questions, but here's the most important one that I always look and providers like to look at. Are your needs met? Your broadband needs met? And from what the details are showing, only 40% of the population, and it's in the charts, in Liberty County, it's pretty close to the same in Walker County. I believe it's even a little less in Walker County. Only they're happy. Over 60% of the people said their broadband needs are not met. And so this opens the door. A county that's supposedly covered, people are happy. This says, no, we're not covered well, we're not happy. So either those companies that provide the service, they better look at this and say, we got a problem here. We need to up our ball game. We need to up our game here, or we're going to invite competition to come in the area. Again, this is a planning tool that a lot of folks, a lot of providers like to use. I spend a lot of hours showing providers how to use this map once it's out. We put together recommended actions based on the data. We look at the data and we come up with some of the basic operations. The big one right here, explore device, one-on-one devices. That's been really popular. That's one of the major driving forces of the survey. And hopefully Operation Connectivity, launched by the governor's office and the governor's broadband, state's broadband committee, is going to solve that issue in a lot of ways. RDOF, real quickly, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. This is the area here in green, and I'll get into this. I want you to notice how green all this is. This is gigabit service, the RDOF auction, and this is the map. You'll have this on here right now. This is the preliminary winners of the auction. And the information, I sent this out on the schedule real quickly. They offered $6 billion in subsidies, and basically the subsidies were only going to cover about 20 to 30% of the actual cost. So the numbers that you see for your county, you know, you can apply your third grade math and show that, yes, they're getting a subsidy. The subsidy is only paid out over a 10-year period. The bill period is going to be 6 years, but the payment schedule is going to be 10 years. They got to be able to bring that, they got to supply that data, bring that infrastructure to your community and build out and maintain it for at least 10 years. So as you can see right now, this funding, they only end up using it was so competitive. It's a reverse auction. It was so competitive. They only used 9.2 billion of the $16 billion offered. So what they're going to do is roll that back into what they call another fund coming up. I'll get into that. But so they're going to continue using all that money for broadband expansion. By the way, this money is from your Universal Service Fund. When you paid your telephone bills all those years and they kept collecting you up, well, you're getting your money back. So that's where this is coming from, is a lot of that money is from the phone bills, and also Congress is now throwing into it because broadband's really important. So far, this is the biggest auction the federal government's ever had. It is dwarfed by the private investment, I will say that. So funding up, so it's going to serve 5.2 million homes. And the minimum speeds were 25 by 3. And I told you, the providers are telling the FCC that that's already outdated. That's already going to be outdated by the time we're done. Connect America 2 program, which was 10 by 1, they just finished up in the spring of 2020. And so, but 10 by 1 is considered underserved even by the new program. So they told the FCC, you got to up your game. It's got to be at least 100 megs down and 20 megs up. The FCC still left it at 25 by 3, but it was so competitive that almost 98% of the locations will receive speeds at 10 by 20. So they totally blew that out of the water. 85% will be receiving gigabit speeds, and which is 1,000 megs down and 500 megs up, which is basically going to be fiber connections. Currently, providers in a quiet period. I know working with Jimmy, working with Liberty County, folks are in Anne Marie in Liberty County. They're in a quiet period. They're not actually able to talk about anything. The quiet period ends today. It might get stretched out 2 more weeks, so they can't really discuss any plans other than say, yes, we're happy we got the broadband service. So hopefully after this quiet period, I'll be able to work. I've reached out to them. I've offered to talk to them. It's what we have, but I know they can't talk to us right now. Right now, it's a 6-year build out, 10-year payment schedule. The way it works right now, 40% of the build has to be done by year 3, 60% by year 4, 80% by year 5, and they got to finish the rest up. During this auction, census blocks are moved in and out. There's some challenges by certain providers here and there, and then also providers that build out, they challenge. So there will be a few census blocks added here and there, but you're only talking about 20 or 30 a year, maybe change hands for an entire state, which is almost nothing. So I want to get into the next phase, which is the next one's going to be phase 2, which is the 905 auction. It was a 905. Now they're calling it phase 2. But so that was originally going to have $4 billion in it, but they took that extra 7 from that was left over from the other auction and put it in this one. So now it's going to be 11, and that's just for the areas that are what considered partially served. They don't have access to broadband, where maybe only 1 or 2 households have been identified. But we started working with the federal government back in, but that's going to that was going to happen this spring, but that's going to be delayed for about 2 years. The Congress finally passed a digital opportunity data collection. We've been working on this with them since 2015. Finally got it passed. But like anything else that happens, they passed the law earlier this year, but they didn't give no money. They didn't put any money into it. Pass the law, but you don't fund it. So anyway, this is going to be a lot more granular. There's been a switch in administrations. We've got a new director, acting director, Rosalind Warcel, I believe is her name. And she's made it clear that until we get the new data, there's no sense in throwing $11 billion out there with bad data. I've got states and I got areas in Texas I know that where the maps are off by at least 50%, if not more. So they are going to say before we throw any more money at it, so we'll delay the phase 2 auction. And so that gives us time to correct a lot of these maps and start working with the communities. I sent this out. This is the amount of funds. I'm breaking this up, the different counties, who those providers are. Again, we're going to find out. See, one of the big surprises is CCO Holding. Charter Communication is stepping up their game, and they're actually now getting involved in a lot of this. And they were actually the biggest winners in the entire country. They bought out Time Warner, but Time Warner's big news is Time Warner's management team took over Charter, and they're very aggressive. They're going after state broadband map or grants and also federal funding, and they're getting into it and is providing gigabit service. So again, I've shared this with you, and I'll leave this open. I'll stop sharing, and hopefully I didn't take up too much time, Jillian. So we'll wait for questions.
That was great. That was
and
really
I'll
rich.
share that with you. That's, like I said, it's a better map. It's a better PowerPoint and a little bit more data. So And a lot of things happened since Wednesday. So there's more stuff coming in. So
That's true.
since I turned it in.
It's a very fluid environment, that's for sure.
It is, yeah.
But thank you. That was really, really rich. I'm sure folks will, they've got copies of the presentations. They've had them for a couple days. I invite you all to jump in after we wrap up with Juliana's presentation. I'm not going to share mine because I'm going to invite her to go ahead and get her presentation up there. Just so you all are aware, she's the launch director for Greentown Labs-Houston. And she is
I think Andrew had a question.
Jillian,
sorry,
did we
go
get a chance to ask questions?
Yes, of course. I'm inviting the questions after both the presenters. So Juliana will wrap up and then we'll open it up for either or.
Okay.
Thank you though. So yeah, Juliana, go right ahead. I'll let you introduce yourself. She's a longtime veteran of the innovation sphere here in Houston. We're really excited and grateful to have her and Tom. And this is a really relevant topic right now with not just what's been going on with COVID, but for the future of the region and the innovation and entrepreneurship space. So go right ahead, Juliana, when you're ready.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you for having me. Yes, Jillian mentioned I've been for 10 years involved in the Houston innovation ecosystem. First, I was running the Houston Angel Network and then the Texas Medical Center Venture Fund till I got recruited by Greentown Labs for its expansion to Houston. So really, really glad to be here. Let me try to move the slides along. There we go. So Greentown Labs is the biggest clean tech, climate tech incubator in North America. It's been 10 years. We've been founded in Boston, Massachusetts, and we have a campus of 3 buildings now outside of Boston that account to 100,000 square feet. And 2/3 of our buildings are actually prototyping space. And then the rest is more like co-working space, the normal WeWork and event community space. So we are a clean tech focus, incubator. And we really focus on companies in that space. So if you check the numbers that we have achieved for 10 years in Boston, they are pretty impressive. And I would say the one we are most proud of is this 88% startup survival rate. Of course, it's not only due to us, we also make sure that we have companies that come from the greatest accelerators before they join us. So, but one of the things we are also very proud of is the fact that we've got more than 1 billion in startup funding and 1.6 billion in terms of regional economic impact in the area of Boston. So if you see our member growth at the bottom of this slide, you can see that every 2.5 years we've doubled members, and it's because we have opened a new building. So hopefully in Houston, we will have the same success. So when we define what climate tech is, it's not only about renewable energy generation and electricity. We also define climate tech by ag tech and water, efficient transportation, manufacturing, energy efficient buildings, and resilience. So basically what we're trying to fight is climate change and make sure that all these companies that you see here reduce the carbon footprint. So in terms of where we're at in the startup journey, we come right after acceleration. So we are an incubator, we are a building. And in general, we have companies that come to us after they have gone through an acceleration program and we're able to raise a Series seed. And they have a little bit of money to pay for a membership at our incubator. In our incubator, what we help them with is with prototyping, pilots, small scale manufacturing, and also very importantly, to have access to the investors who they're gonna do the Series A with. In general, the companies come to Greentown Labs with 1 or 2 people. They stay an average of 2 years with us, and they leave once they've raised their Series A and they have outgrown us with 10 to 15 people. So these are the sponsors that we've been having in Boston, and you can see there's different levels of engagement, and we really think that one of the reasons why we expanded to Houston is because many of the sponsors you can see here have a very strong presence in Houston. So they were the ones that actually started, engaging and saying like making an expansion to Houston would really make a lot of sense. In terms of our success stories, because we are mainly a hardware B2B incubator, although we also have software companies, we not only think about success stories by the number of investments, the dollars of investment our companies get. Yeah, it is important, and we've had quite a lot of investments, but the route for hardware companies is not a direct from IP to IPO. Many cases, these hardware companies really need to be sold to corporates. And for that, it's very important to get pilots going. So having pilots is one of the things that we consider a success story for us. And also project collaborations, having big corporations as customers, R&D contracts, and joint development. So we really, after 10 years, we have really refined and made very efficient route from startup to corporation. We really believe that we are the kind of translators that startup need to try to talk to corporates in their same language. And with some of these corporations, because we've been working for all those 10 years, our relationship with them has really evolved. And we've also created with them corporate-led startup programs. And those programs that we call launch programs are actually defined by the corporation in terms of the challenges they are facing. So instead of trying to solve some of those challenges internally by trying to get their own technology and innovation, they decided to come to us so that we can frame the challenge with them. And sometimes it can be like really very, very precise, in terms of the kind of technologies they need. And once we frame the challenge together, we do an open search that is a global search all over the world for companies that are already working in those problems. And we jointly select them. And then we spend around 6 to 8 months really working with the startups so that they can deliver in terms of the innovation required for the company. And that's where, again, you get quite a lot of great success like pilots and joint development contracts, R&D, and to outright acquisition. So this is, I would say, it's a different way of accelerating companies. In general, you have more like a cohort of companies that have solutions that are looking for problems. In our case, it's more like, the corporate-led acceleration where the problem is already there. And, it's a much more efficient way to work with the corporations. This is our advisory board in Boston. And one of the things, of course, is that many of these companies are also in Houston. So actually 2 days ago, we did our first ever joint advisory board between Boston and Houston. And let me tell you, it was pretty exciting to be part of that. The chat behind the Zoom meeting was on fire because they were already the Houston Advisory Board and the Boston Advisory Board were making so many great connections. So it was pretty great to see how the synergies between Boston and Houston were already happening. So the big reasons why we expanded to Houston, and I've already told you about, of course, our partners being big promoters of us expanding to Houston. But of course, I think that the biggest one is that Houston is the global energy capital. And we thought that, if we need to solve climate change, there's no way we can do it without Houston. So we really had to come and make sure that we catalyze the energy transition in Houston. We had committed champions, not only in terms of corporate partners, but also the mayor was a real big one. He actually wrote a letter to our Boston board to ask them to do the expansion to Houston. And also we felt that we were filling a gap. There was no cleantech ecosystem convener in the city of Houston, although there was a very burgeoning startup scene with a lot of newcomers like Mass Challenge, with whom we really work very closely with in Boston. So we were really excited to have the same expansion for Mass Challenge into Texas. So as I mentioned, the mayor of Houston has been key. Now, actually, he has been proclaimed as the chair for the climate mayors. So, you know, that's a big honor that he just got. And on February 2nd, we're going to do a groundbreaking ceremony with him at our building. So we're really, really excited about his commitment to the energy transition as a whole, and of course, his support to Greentown Labs. So in Greentown Labs, you know, we're not only trying to create at scale like we've been doing in Boston by fostering startups. We are really trying to create and build an ecosystem from scratch. So of course, the challenge is big, but at the same time, we believe that all the ingredients that are required to build a strong ecosystem are there. And I think, you know, one of the things that is really missing is trying to put them all together, you know, and that's what, you know, we really want to help with by being the convener and the open space where all these ecosystem players can gather and make innovation happen. So this is what our space in Houston is going to look like. So we are going to be opening a co-working space and lab space that is accounting to 40,000 square feet at the old Fiesta supermarket in Midtown, or what we call now the Innovation District between downtown and Rice and the Texas Medical Center. We're going to host more than 50 startups and 120 desks in our co-working space. And, you know, one of the things that has been a little bit like the silver lining of COVID is that because many of the great services we could deliver to our members in Boston became virtual, we thought we might as well have our Houston community take advantage of the same services. That's when we decided to create this early access virtual membership to Houston. And we actually had a huge show like or interest, you know, and within like a couple of weeks we had 16 inaugural members for Greentown Labs-Houston, and now we're actually at 20 members. So really, really excited with the huge display of interest. So in terms of the expansion timeline, just a second. I'm gonna try to have them stop because I didn't realize that they were coming. Okay. They're kind of leaving now. So in terms of the expansion timeline for Houston, we are now in the middle of the launch phase. We have already raised 8.3 million out of the 10 million we need to make Greentown Labs happening in Houston. And we're gonna do our grand opening on Earth Day, which is April 2021. And we are really on schedule for that. So these are the partners that have shown support. And actually on February 2nd, we're going to announce 5 more partners. So we're really very, very proud of our partners. One of the things that actually the board in Boston made as a condition for our expansion to Houston when the mayor of Houston asked for that expansion is that only 50% of the money required to make Greentown Labs happen in Houston would come from oil and gas companies. So we've done a huge effort to make sure that we have a real diverse set of founding and grand opening partners in this initiative. And that's why not only you have the Shell, the Chevrons, and the BHPs, but you also have representatives of the renewable energy companies like ENGIE and Sonova, tech companies like Microsoft, construction companies like Saint-Gobain and Rice Management Company, of course, the utilities with NRG Reliant, Direct Energy and Naturgy, but also the circularity companies like FCC Environmental Services in the investor community with big investors like Tudor Pickering Holt, SCF Partners, and the American Family Institute. So, of course, one of the things that we needed to make sure is that we had a very strong Houston advisory board. And actually, one of the things we think that is key about this advisory board is like the thought leadership table where the big leaders that are trying to tackle energy transition and climate change, not only in Houston, but all over the world, could talk openly about innovation. So you have our highest level, what we call terawatt level sponsors that have an automatic seat at our advisory board. And that's people like Barbara Berger from Chevron, Ajay Mehta from Shell, Daryl Willis from Microsoft, Elizabeth Killinger from NRG, Michelle Thomas from BHP, and James Garrett from VNE. And the rest are really luminaries of the energy transition, like Michael Skelly or Tim Kopra or David Bowie, who are really helping us frame our strategy, not only for Houston and actually for its climate action plan, where we are the preferred execution partner, but also for energy transition globally. So in terms of how the grand opening partners and founding partners have been engaged with us, we have, as I mentioned before, different levels of engagement, the Terawatt giving access to the advisory board and the Kilowatt being the lowest level, all of course divided into 3 years. So the engagement to be able to be a founding partner or grand opening partner for Greentown Labs in Houston is divided into 3-year engagement. These are some of the partner benefits you can have when you become a grand opening partner or a founding partner of Greentown Labs Houston. And we're not only talking about brand recognition and visibility, but also about community access and engagement. So one of the things we are really looking forward to doing is this groundbreaking ceremony with the mayor on February 2nd. We are really proud that the mayor is going to come and not only do the groundbreaking ceremony, also reveal the exterior facade and the new look and feel we're going to have for the exterior of Greentown. We're really trying to make sure it no longer looks like a supermarket. And one of the things we're going to do also during that reveal ceremony is we're going to present our 5 new partners, and 2 of them are going to be giving remarks, as well as our landlord, that is the Rice Management Company. This event, of course, because it's going to be at our location in the Midtown District, it's, you know, of course, we're following all the COVID restrictions, and one of the things we're going to do is record it, and we're going to show the recording and the remarks from the mayor at a celebratory virtual energy bar on February 4th, to which you are all invited to, and we will have the rest of our partners speaking there too to celebrate this new commitment. These are the kind of visibility opportunities our partners had. So, you know, we announced that we were coming to Houston on June 16th, and before that we were on stealth mode. And then since then, we've also announced our location on September 22nd, but we've been involved in so many speaking engagement, highlighting our commitment to Houston and the energy transition. And a lot of media highlights, not only in terms of the Houston media, but also in terms of the national and international media with, you know, articles at the Financial Times and The Economist, amongst others. So this is what we have at Greentown, and we're open for question now, I believe, for both speakers.
That's right. Thank you. I think, Andrew, you may already have one for the first speaker. I'll let you guys jump in. I always have a couple planned in my back pocket, but please, board members, have at it. And members who are attending in the public.
Andrew, why don't you go first?
Thank you. Actually, I ended up having questions for both, but I'll start with the one that I initially kicked off with. And this is to Tom Stephenson with Connected Nation. Tom, thank you very much in terms of the update. I'm located in Fort Bend County, so very much aware of some of the initiatives that you talked about with Walker County, et cetera. I'm curious, you know, there's a significant amount of attention to rural areas and funding for rural areas. And I wonder about what happens to those areas that are more in that gray space, that the boundaries between urban and rural, where we've got a lot of that in Fort Bend County. And so it seems like in many cases they're quote unquote forgotten, and they're kind of left up to their own devices in terms of progressing things. But maybe that's a perception issue. The challenge is that it's high growth, and we always feel and seem that we're always behind in being able to deliver services to both residences and commercial. So just curious about your take from that perspective for that boundary area.
Those are what the FCC is declaring as partially served. If you open up that FCC map, the most recent one I put on the link on the PowerPoint, when you open that up, there's a little thing that says latency, gigabit service, but there's also one that says partially served areas. And I didn't turn that on, but it's lining in. Those are areas that have maybe 1 or 2 people serving in it. So those are a lot of it in the outlying areas. So they're highlighted in red. And the thing about the FCC is what the new chairman is saying. There should be a lot more of those on the maps than what there already is. And so that's what they're looking to do, is get a lot more granular before we do any more broadband planning, put any more money out there, let's find out, there's several of those areas are missing on the map. And I'll be the first to admit it. So that's what the digital, the new, what I want to call the digital mapping program is supposed to do. So hopefully we'll do that. And also you can, I give you a link. I gave you a link for the Connected Nation, Connected Nation Texas maps. And if those areas are claimed to be served, they should be notified so somebody can come out and fix those maps, especially at the state level, which would help you with some of the federal programs, not so much the FCC, maybe at some point the FCC. But I know also the USDA Digital Opportunity or USDA Reconnect program, I believe they've got another 900 million. That rumor's floating around 900, 600. NTIA's got another 600 million for broadband. They want to put even more into it. So the quicker we can get those areas identified, they can start qualifying for programs. We have one in Michigan we call the Connecting Michigan, where the state put aside a program. And it's basically used by the providers to capture those little areas. You might see somebody applying for 15 or 20 of those spots at a time. So I hope that helps.
It does, Tom, and I appreciate that. And I also recognize the fact that, in Fort Bend County is not unique to this. I mean, with the growth that we've seen all across the Houston area, the 13 counties that are represented on this call, I think that's just a struggle that we're all dealing with. But some communities are very much focused on how do we prioritize and how can we, work with the providers to invest and to deliver what people are looking for.
In the case when you're working with the providers too, a lot of cases they'll look at these maps and say, well, why do I want to go here? It's already served by so-and-so. And so, and I think that's where these engagements help, to where you get those one-on-one conversations where you grab that provider, you throw them in a pickup truck and you drive out into those rural areas and say, look, you don't see cable hanging on this telephone pole here. So anyway, that's what we try to do, and it happens a lot. So I usually work census block at a time. So that's how I do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew, did you also have one for the next speaker, or?
I do, and actually, let me finish with Tom one more real quick.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Tom, is Jennifer Harris still the person at Connected Nation Texas?
Yes, she's still the person, right.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Julian just asked me to come in and talk about RDOF real quick. So she said, just keep her simple, forget the fluff, and go right in and talk about RDOF in the community. So that's what I did.
Thank you. Very good.
Jillian, do we have the slides from Tom?
Yes, yeah, they've already come in, and they'll be going live online as well at the end of this. So you should have it in your emails and on the calendar invite.
Right.
I'm going to send you the new one, which is even better yet. So I made it better. So.
And yeah, Connected Nation's most recent maps, we put them in our high-speed internet strategy, the ones that had, I think the latest for those was like April 2020, but now every time I know they get an update, we're going to be putting it on our GCEDD broadband page. And I'll get to some of this a little bit later. We're going to be hopefully having a lot of live online mapping tools that are I'm going to help you guys get at least a starting point for, what he's talking about, going census tract and block by block, that at least want to know what's the universe that we should be really focusing on to be strategic about it. So we're going to be trying to provide y'all some more support at HGAC to help y'all find out where the most need is. So we're
Good.
working with them on that.
That's good. I want to say hello to some guy. He looks strange, that Joshua Owens guy up there. I didn't see your name on her. Are you filling in for Chad, or are you the guy?
I went ahead and took on over for Chad.
Okay. Well, you need to let us know, There'll be a
I just
fine
wanted
next
to
time.
chime in and thank Tom for all the work he's done in Wharton County. It's been really valuable. We haven't been able to, our survey has been a real slog. There's a lot of survey fatigue out there, but the data that they've collected and helping us help think through our internet is already starting to bear fruit. And we're starting to get a lot more interest from providers in a rural community, which is a real blessing. And I wanted to thank Tom for that. And I wanted to ask Juliana about Greentown Labs and how can EDCs, economic development corporations, and other economic development professionals in the region support your work? And what can we do? How can we benefit from what's going on in Greentown Labs?
Good question. Juliana, unmute, please.
Thank you. Again, I think the sound is going to be better, but sorry about that. Yeah, so in terms of the collaboration with EDCs, we really believe that it can be told. We want to have access to the most diverse talent we can get, We really believe that climate change can only be solved and there's climate justice. Climate change impacts more unfavorably underserved communities. So we want them to be part of the solution. And the way we can make that happen is first by having them involved in any way, shape, or form. So getting to know about our building. One of the things we're doing is in one of the building, we are actually going to have some street art, and we are actually creating an RFP with the Houston Arts Alliance so that we can have that connection to the community in Houston and have local artists, do some street art for us where, we're going to symbolize that we are not only wanting this building to be part of the community, but the community inside our building, and also that we want to make sure that we fight climate change with them in mind too. So, access to the community, making sure that they are part of what we're doing. So we want to try to really inspire as many people from the environment, from the community as possible in terms of environment. We want to have visits from local schools, local high schools. We're going to try to have some kind of shadowing projects with some people from the community shadowing entrepreneurs. We are trying to already do quite a lot of events in careers in terms of the energy transition. We've already started that. And we want to make sure that more students are aware that, this kind of way with being entrepreneurial, trying to fight climate change is something that, could be also an avenue for them. And then one of the things we think we could also help with is with our technologies by doing pilots. One of the reasons we're coming to the Innovation District is not only because we think it's a great place to be, and there are not many buildings that are light industrial buildings where we can set up a place like Greentown Labs. So the building was also a key criteria for our decision to come over to the Innovation District. But we really believe that one of the reasons why we thought this district was very interesting is because there's a lot of potential for pilot. A lot of our companies to be pilot and are going to be showcasing their innovation, and these innovations always mean that we can get more renewable access to energy, all these things, and hopefully at some point we will also be impacting those communities that need access to renewable energy, to connectivity through those new solutions even more than the rest. So one of the things that we're actually planning to do is we're going to be presenting to RDOF. And Susan Davenport from the Greater Houston Partnership has very kindly offered us a presentation to them. So we really believe that through that presentation, we're going to make about how we're trying to change and catalyze this area of town. We will get more engagement from the EDCs.
I just wanted to comment that we have tens of thousands of acres in Wharton County that is under development for renewable energies. We have battery plants coming in, and we want to really see that kind of energy development being tied back into the green economy. One of the issues with our green energy development is it does create a lot of construction jobs, but there's not a lot of ongoing jobs with that. And so we want to see the training and ongoing development and some of the technology move into our rural communities as well, where the actual energy development is being created.
Definitely. And one of the things that is happening actually with our companies that are already members of Greentown Lab is that most of their pilots are anyway in the rural areas outside of Houston, you know. So we really believe that we need to make sure that not only the pilots are there, but that the development of their technologies stay also there and really helps the local communities in rural areas. So of course, the Skylark Wireless is one of our members too. So we are very happy because we really believe that it really totally aligns with our mission. But you know, in terms of being able to not only pilot in rural areas, but actually develop the technologies and create jobs in rural areas is the way we want to go. So we are based in Houston because that's where we have the biggest access to our corporates and we can meet and impact the most corporate people. But at the same time, our companies are establishing their projects in rural areas. So,
I think you made a mistake in not being based in Wharton, but Houston is also a great place to have a second campus, you know, and nothing wrong with Houston. And there is a lot of corporate presence there, but, you know, just think about maybe secondary, third office in Wharton, Texas. All right.
That's what I think one of the biggest, I would say, changes we're going to have from Boston. In Boston, we created a very big density. We have 3 buildings that are next to one another, and then a 4th extra official building where all of our alumni are moving into once they overgrow Greentown and outgrow it. In Houston, you know, when we expand, I think we're going to have a different way of doing it because we know that Houston is an hour away from Houston anyway, and we need to make sure that we have access to all that Houston has to offer. So most probably we'll do it differently and we will expand more widely than we've done in Boston.
Juliana, this is Andrew Van Chow. Thank you very much again for your presentation this morning, but also congratulations on the role that you're leading with. You probably don't recall, but you and I had a chat about 2 years ago through the involvement through innovation ecosystem activities. I'm trying to remember if it was at a Station Houston event or a Greater Houston Partnership event, but thank you for that. Just building on what Josh and you have been talking about, you know, Houston is an hour away from Houston. The tendency in this group when we talk about Houston is to think about Houston, not just from the city boundaries perspective, but the broader, you know, 13 county region, and which means, you know, 13 county judges, 160 plus mayors that of the communities that are all represented in this region. And, you know, it was great to see the folks that have already been invited to serve in the advisory council. I recognize many of them, and I also recognize many, if not all of them, are essentially Harris County residents. And so there's absolutely an opportunity as you think about leadership to look at not just the city of Houston, but the region, you know, at the Woodlands, at Sugarland, at just all these other communities where so much is happening. There are 2, I think, areas to think about. One is workforce development and labor pool. The latest regional labor information that was issued just a couple of weeks ago by Parker Harvey at Workforce Solutions highlighted that a lot of manufacturing got impacted with the downturn in oil and gas. And, we hear about, the opportunities in renewables and other energy sectors. So building on what Josh was talking about, it's not just the installation of these large facilities, it's also the manufacturing capacity and capability that we should be focusing in on, and the kind of investments to attract that to our region, and whatever we can do to work with you and other partners to make that happen. The other aspect is also on the investment side of things. I continually hear about the shortfall that the Houston region has in terms of access to venture capital, that it dwarfs in comparison to other regions around the country. But I think sometimes it's because we haven't really engaged the broader region, because if you think about it, there are lots of companies that are located in that map, but also individuals, and many individuals that are very well heeled that are looking for these kinds of opportunities, but may not even be aware of it because they haven't been contacted and haven't been extended the invitation to learn more about this. So a couple thoughts for you just to think through, but welcome the opportunity to engage, and looking forward to some of the opportunities down the road. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts as you think about that region versus city perspective.
Definitely, climate change is global. So, but if you think about the impact we want to have in Houston, for sure we're thinking Texas-wide, because many of the growth strategies that are thought for Houston, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to go through this new sort of report that was put together by the University of Houston and the Center of Houston's Future, called the 4 Areas of Growth, that I thought was really, really great. And it talks about the opportunities for Houston to become a low carbon economy. And, 2 of the opportunities are really in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And a lot of it uses the same technology that it is used by oil and gas. You're drilling to do the carbon storage. You use pipelines to move the carbon. You figured out carbon to value initiatives. The same thing for hydrogen. We are the biggest producer of hydrogen. We are a hydrogen hub. So we really think that there's a lot of things that can be done then, and the same in terms of circularity. We are the biggest producers of PVC. If we change the design of our products and the value chains of our manufacturing, so that we also include the reuse and recycling part, and try also with chemical recycling by really trying to heat the plastic and reuse it again as a prime source for more plastics. I think, if you check in that study, you're thinking about, every sector could lead to at least 30,000 new jobs. And of course, a lot has to be done in terms of workforce development for that, but really believe that the main skills required for those jobs are skills that these workers already have. So that's already great assets. In our case, we are trying to work with workforce development Texas-wide too. We are very involved in trying to make sure that we can get as many people transitioned to cleaner energies and to new technologies as possible. On the area of access to VC, I agree with you that, we haven't had a lot of access to VC, but I think in the past 2 years, things have changed drastically. And I don't know if you have access to the data that has been generated by Houston Exponential, because they actually publish, I don't know if it's yearly or quarterly reports on the kind of access to VC that our companies have had. And it's more like tripled in the last years. It's growing exponentially. And one of the reasons, of course, is because H-GAC created this H-GAC Fund of Funds that led the same kind of strategy that the Renaissance Fund did in Detroit, where big corporations put some money, and then these fund of funds is investing in funds that are outside of Houston, but with one condition: they need to come to Houston to check deals. They don't have to invest in the deals, but they need to come and check on deals. And that means that suddenly we've had, like, you know, with the first fund of funds, H-GAC Fund 1, I think we had like 10 different VCs coming that didn't used to come to Houston. And now H-GAC has raised a second fund that is a much bigger one. And we really believe that we're going to have many more. And actually, if you want to really see the impact that this has had, you just have to log into the Venture Summit that is happening next week on Thursday and Friday. Because you're going to be very surprised by the caliber of venture capital that are speaking at that event, and also the caliber of companies that are presenting and are actually in a competition to access quite a lot of money. You know, the money prize is already pretty sizable, and it's all going to be awarded by local VCs. So I think there's a lot of growth. I still think that there's a lot of potential for more growth. And I really believe that one of the ways, and that's why we have in our founding partners, we have investment banking like Tudor Pickering Holt, or private equity offices like SCF Partners, because, you know, they are further along to what our companies need in terms of investment. They're investing further along, but they see the importance of creating an ecosystem. And they're realizing, you know, after they have engaged with us for almost a year, that they are actually not as far along as they thought they were. Because, you know, with the kind of companies we have, the technology can escalate very fast, and suddenly they're readier for this kind of very big investments than you would think. So in 1 year, things for these companies can change drastically, and they can be raising their Series Bs and up. So they have realized that, you know, we are at this J curve where things are escalating in terms of technology adoption, and they really think that they need to be there so that, you know, they don't miss the train.
Yep. Thank you, Juliana. That was good response. I'm going to start going first, because I'm going to ditto what Joshua Owens said and what Andrew said, and we get it about Houston. Houston is a 900-pound gorilla. That's the thing's been going on forever, and it's true. We understand what's happening there, and we wouldn't be who we all are in these surrounding counties without Houston and Harris County, but they wouldn't be where they are either without us. And you know, Fort Bend, I push Fort Bend. I push all the counties actually, but I live in Fort Bend, former county judge in Fort Bend. I do everything here. And that board, I noticed that last night, and it was one of my comments I was going to make, and I'm glad Andrew picked up on it, because I think that's something I'm just going to say very seriously. I think you need to take back to your people. You know, they need to discuss that, because we're all in this together. And we don't need to be just invited to a breakfast or a lunch and hear about what everybody is doing and what they've done. We'd like to be part of that. With that, we're kind of running short on time. And I don't know if anyone, does anyone else have a quick question that can be answered, or a question that can be answered quickly by Juliana or by Tom?
So Mike, before we get into further questions, we first of all, we consider it very carefully, but one of the things you need to understand is that Greentown Labs is open not only to Houstonians, but to everybody.
Oh, we understand.
And now that everything is virtual, it's much easier, because, you know, you don't need to be in Houston to have access to everything we do. No. And you don't need to be invited to have a say with what we do, because you are already more than welcome. In Boston, before COVID, we had 380 events a year. And that could only happen because other people organize them. You know, we would only organize 20% of those. The rest were like community organizations, everybody from any county that came to do events that had somehow a relationship with the community or with, you know, clean tech, climate tech. Our doors are really open.
Yeah, we understand that completely. We're not raining on your parade. We're just making suggestions and making comments. I don't think I didn't hear anybody speak up about questions.
Judge, there is one quick question from Juliana. She was just asking how might the community outreach go beyond the initial buzz and excitement of this launch period that you're all in? And so you
That's
just
for who?
that one. And
Is that for Tom
from
or Juliana?
Jennifer Curley, who was she the one that was here representing? Yes, she's here as a proxy for Gwen Tillotson. So this is a Houston related question.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
We're actually working with Gwen in some initiatives already. Yeah, as I mentioned before, we are reaching out to everybody, actually quite a few community associations to our virtual events, and that's the way, they are heard. And some of them have concerns about many things, and we are trying to address those. We are a place where all kinds of, different messaging, we are an open space. Innovation happens when we hear everybody and when we collide and we have different, looks and perspectives. And the same thing for the community. We are super open to the community. We are very proactive in terms of what we can organize. So what I always say is that, first way of engaging with us is making sure you register to our newsletter. Making sure you register to our newsletter. In our newsletter, you will see that we do a lot of engaging with the community, but it's not only to keep you up to date on what we do, it's also to trigger some thoughts, So when you see that we're doing a careers in energy transition event where we're inviting 30 different people to have a table so that they can train, and we have from HCC to companies that are already hiring, and things like that. It's like, I want to do that with Greentown Labs. So I want to do something similar, but with my people. I want to do this, but I want to do it at Fort Bend. If you come to us with ideas, we will make them happen, and that's how we like our partners. And by partners, I'm not saying only corporate partners or sponsors. I'm saying every kind of community partner to come to us and tell us what they would like Greentown Labs to be for them and for the community, because we can really make it happen. And sometimes, it's easy. I mean, I like it when, people come with concrete ideas, because it's easy to say like, I haven't been invited, or complain like, oh, nobody's telling us how we can get engaged. Well, the way you can get engaged is by telling us how you prefer to get engaged. So my main message is help us help you, So I think this access to our newsletters will trigger ideas, will trigger initiatives, and please feel free to reach out. Our door is always open. And if you have any ideas on how we can collaborate, we are very happy to make it happen.
Great, good. Okay, any other questions, Julian?
That was all from the chat. I believe we're ready to shift gears here, and I really appreciate the speakers that have joined us today, Tom and Juliana. Thank you all so much.
Okay, and I thank you as well. Let's move to item number 8. It's going to be a roundtable discussion. And Jillian, I'm going to hand that over to you. Let me get I printed it out last night so I can follow.
Sure. Let me get my screen sharing again. So, I think can you all see the opener here? You don't see my PDF here, highlights end of year survey? Oh.
Nope. Now something's happening.
Share.
There it is.
Okay. Andrew, your hand is still up. Are you doing all right, or is that just a click off issue? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, everybody. Sarah, if anyone else raises their hands or anything like that, just chime in, or Judge, I invite y'all to help keep me walking and chewing gum at the same time here. So I really just wanted to spend a few moments. Oh, Judge, I believe you're muted and you might be talking.
Yeah, I'll do that all the time on these meetings. I was just going to gently suggest for everyone, we are at 11:30 and we'll try to get finished by 12 o'clock.
That's right.
All right.
So yeah, I really just wanted to walk through this. You guys have taken the survey, you've seen it in advance. We've had, I know before I even was in this role, y'all have had numerous sort of strategic planning conversations. I wanted to invite some discussion, and the purpose of this for me in seeing y'all's responses was for me to target, outreach and understand where folks' priorities are, because, I'm always working on helping y'all drum up resources, but I also work guided by an action plan and the CEDs. And that can always go through a sort of, to use BJ's terms, go through a sort of evergreening and revitalizing that discussion. And I really just want to invite some conversation around any sort of nuances or particulars that we might want to focus on in some specific areas that are important to the group. So I just wanted to walk through the first few slides, and then I'll open it up towards the end. This is the kind of thing where you guys can stop me if y'all had anything particular that jumps out, but yeah, we can definitely open it up at the end. All right, so sent that out to you all and invited y'all to share with some of your peers that you work often with in economic development. Here's a summary of our responses. I had to update this right this morning because I got one last response in last minute, and I wanted to make sure it was as representative as possible. So we got 73% of our board plus another 7 folks responded to it. And we've got the geographic breakdown. I sent a few update or requests to fill it out and didn't quite hit every county, but that doesn't mean we couldn't keep pushing it out. But just letting y'all know, this is the primary representation of those who responded and the organizational levels that they represent. The first line of thought was really focused on how things are going during COVID and sort of what that impact was like. Was it something that exceeded your expectations? Did things actually turn out better for you than you thought they might be in terms of, the impacts? And that particularly relates to things like sales tax. People's spending behaviors really shifted dramatically. So people saw, on the fiscal side of things looked up, but at the same time, people are, there's a lot of displacement in the workforce, and there's some major, large CapEx projects that have been stalled or delayed indefinitely. There's been layoffs. And so there's been, you see some folks who experience those mixed results in the same community. So we had some folks that are like, well, it's been kind of all over the place. Although we did ask specifically, because we get asked this by EDA, they like to know where there's any closures of businesses and what industries. So we had a handful that had experienced quite a few. And then almost everybody indicated that they have seen some, particularly in small business, related to like your mom and pop stores, but some, major brands shuttered, like Bell's and folks that were retail anchors. So we've kind of seen stuff that I'm sure you've all seen pop up in the news were really reflected in the survey here. So I just kind of summarized when folks responded in a comments section what industries they were seeing. I sort of put them in these 3 buckets here: petrochem, manufacturing, the supply and services to that industry, retail, and food and beverage. And then we talked about what sort of methods they were using to respond. And the bulk of it was a lot of things that we HGAC are doing, which is, sharing information where there are federal or state pots of money or even private and foundation money to support small businesses, in particular, surveying and assessing the state of the economy, just looking at any jobs reports and workforce data, anything that we could get our hands on. We've tried to share and push out as much, particularly local data, as we could. So we'll be continuing to share those updates. Collaborating with our partners, grants and loans. I did do quite a lot of additional interviews on top of this survey, and grants and loans directly to small businesses were pretty common. I'd say more common than this subset of survey respondents indicate. I'd say there's quite a few more communities who were doing small grants and loans and things like that, but other just programmatic things as well. In terms of, how do they view the next sort of short-term period versus the longer term, there is overall still a lot of optimism. I think people still don't know whether it's the vaccine rollout or otherwise, if it's quite time to be optimistic just yet. But in the longer term, folks are feeling pretty confident. And so that's a good sign. And that's just for their local communities. Comparing that to what they think of the region, and it's still very overly optimistic. So I think that speaks to our understanding that we live in a complex metropolitan environment, and we all know and understand how to leverage our different strengths at our local levels too. So that's sort of the outlook. I found this really interesting, and I dug into this quite a lot. We can talk about it if y'all want to. Overall priorities, this wasn't a super surprise, but business retention, expansion, and attraction are the bulk of the focus, even folks who aren't in an economic development corporation environment. It's, growing jobs. That is the bulk of what a lot of you all focus on, but also the infrastructure that creates the foundation for those jobs and the enterprises to grow. Workforce development, of course, and then right on down. But I'd say those first four, there was a lot of consensus around that. Challenges were a little bit more dispersed, or I'd say there was just less sort of consensus around that. And I did cap this at 3 to sort of really narrow down and focus, what is the thing that is the challenge? And a lot of folks saying the educational attainment of workforce is a barrier, a challenge to achieving their goals and success in their priorities. Aging and limited infrastructure, it's not a surprising one there. That is a huge part of what we focus on. And just a need for more cooperation among partners. I think to achieve success in these first 2 other challenges, this one is almost naturally implicated there. So needing to have a lot of different folks in the room focused on the same goals. So I see a lot of opportunity, despite, these are stated in a negative light. I think this actually sheds light on how we can design some proactive strategies to deal with that. I also wanted to touch on what folks' real estate priorities are, because so much of what we do is focused on the development landscape. And so I use this sort of weighted average system to give you an indication of the overall level of priority. And I'd say everybody, well, not everybody, but the bulk of you all say that industrial is either high or moderate priority. And then it follows to mixed use, then retail, office. Open space, I was glad to see, some folks really still feel like that's an important one to leverage, I'm sure, from a quality of life standpoint and things like flood mitigation. And then residential and agricultural. And there are still some communities, particularly we talk a lot about our surrounding areas and our rural counties. Agriculture is still a priority, and it's still a strategic asset. Where we saw potential for greater regional collaboration, I find this really interesting, and I hope to, whether or not we get to it today or at another, follow up to this, workforce development. We have a massive workforce development division within our agency. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and we can sort of hone in on what that looks like. I collaborate and provide technical assistance on a lot of grants to expand those programs, but I think when you have a community or a metropolitan region with 3.3 million jobs, making sure that everybody stays upskilled is a continual challenge. So, and then infrastructure, business attraction, we're about tied there, business retention and expansion, and then innovation, which, we had a couple conversations around that. Not to say these things aren't also priorities, but those were the top ones according to the most consensus. Outside partnerships that you all would like to cultivate, workforce development, private developers, and industry sector associations, followed by, I kind of classified the whole education landscape, because we had some interest in pre-K programs, which, the Head Start programs are really vital for long-term educational attainment, and then all the way through higher ed. Other major employers, some really interesting ideas start bubbling up in my head for how we can do that, but we'll get to that in a minute. Areas of improvement for us at the agency, how we can serve you all better. Data tools and analytics. That's a big one. It's a big part of what we do. So I think I'd love to probe that a little further, and maybe it's an issue of how we communicate those and making it easier, more accessible for you all to get the information you need from the giant funnel of information that we provide. And so I definitely want to work with y'all more on how we can design some programs for y'all that help you do that. Facilitating more partnerships. I mean, I know we all like to be in-person meetings. That's a big part of how we connect and network, but we'll do some focused look there. And then sub-regional programs and planning, which is interesting, and starting to think about, how can we think about whether we're talking about the central hub of Harris County and the immediately adjacent communities, or is it an urban rural or a coastal dynamic? We can start to probe a little bit further as far as what do we mean when we want to articulate that? Is it just about geography, or is it more about affinity and alignment on industry focus? So this is sort of the summary of the summary slides and where we saw the most consensus on each of these. And I'm going to pause here before I get to some of the other work plan discussion and see if anything really jumped out to y'all and beckoned additional questions, or wanted to know from your peers anything that had to do with responses, or just the big picture and takeaways of the summary and what it maybe made you think while you were taking it. Does anybody have any comments? Not just yet? Okay. Well, I did want to shift gears and talk about how sort of we take this and incorporate it into some existing tools that we have for deciding what we focus on here at the GCEDD, and particularly what myself and my colleagues work on behind the scenes and in our different economic development programs at H-GAC. And so, these were the 4 primary focus areas of our action plan. We still focus on broadband, and I put in some italics here some of the things that we're working on right now, which I mentioned. We've formed an interagency working group because we have a lot of assets and information and data from different corners of our agency that have never really sort of been set and looked at from the lens of what that could unlock for communities that are seeking to increase broadband. Particularly the access and the supply side and that infrastructure piece. So we're going to be doing an online interactive mapping tool that, like I said, it really gets you, because as Tom mentioned, a lot of FCC data, if you don't have some really on the ground supplementary data, it can really not be quite as accurate as you need. That being said, it gives you a starting point. And so we're going to be pulling together some supply side information, and we're working on getting communications towers and vertical assets mapped so people understand, where they have opportunities for, that wireless provision, and talking about infrastructure projects. And, people talk a lot about dig once policies. What's the universe of, public right of way or right of way that could also incorporate laying fiber. So we can map that out and at least give you all the tools to start assessing that. And there's a wealth of, code and other agreements and other resources that you can at least start with to design a dig once or a digital ready community policy of your own. So that's the broadband side of things that'll be coming together pretty quickly. There are a lot of federal programs that Tom mentioned rather, that are going to be announced fairly soon. And we want y'all to be ready for that and at least have what's publicly available in hand, sort of pre-digested, so that you can have those partners and service providers ready to go. So a lot coming on broadband. Any questions on the broadband side of things, or anyone have anything they'd like to share that they're working on?
Jillian, just very quickly, on the points you just made about the year ahead and some of the priorities, but also connecting it to some of the things that Tom was talking about in terms of dollars that have been set aside for grants to pursue some of this activity and this work. I guess, just making sure that we're crystal clear here. Some of that collaboration you talked about is about identifying those grants and actually working with communities to make sure that they're not leaving dollars on the table. Is that right?
Yes, that is the thinking. And, they're incredibly competitive, the federal programs, and we're looking at USDA. Sarah's going to mention a few more that we've documented in the federal stimulus and legislative packet that are at the end of your agenda packet there. But yeah, we're basically saying we're going to be mapping out what we know, so any sort of publicly available data, and where the opportunities might be. and sort of helping you see, okay, if I want to look at this program, how do I understand what parts of my communities could I look at? Because for instance, you've got Reconnect program where you can do pretty much any technology under the sun. Whereas if you go towards the distance learning and telemedicine program, that's like a mobile device type of tool. So they're just really understanding the different levers that you have to pull and who your partnerships might be. And then we're trying to get all of those contacts, just like Tom was saying, getting them on the phone directly and saying, we want to work with you. We know where our priority areas are. And, like I said, we can't do all of it for you, but we can give you those first 2 or 3 steps to get you there and get everybody at the table and ready to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I would just build on that. The other thing too, to keep in mind, it's not always just about the federal side of things. It's also the state side.
Yep.
And of course, the governor in early 2020 appointed several folks to his Broadband Development Council. I'm not sure how well our region is actually represented on that council. And again, leadership drives outcomes, right? And so I think we should probably take a look at that and figure out, do we have the representation on that council? And if not, how do we get that?
Yes, that's a great question. And I do know that Chuck and a few other of us who have been part of these discussions were invited to the precursor to that announcement over the course of last year. And that was related to the sort of, proposals that came out to form the council and to do a regional broadband plan. So I know Chuck is aware of it. I do think you're right. We should track that closely. And I'll talk also with Rick Guerrero to see what local government representation we have there. We definitely, I completely agree with you, and I'll flag that as well. Make sure our region's represented. Anybody else want to talk about more broadband? All right. Infrastructure wise, a lot of this is just being kept abreast of where there are projects and, just y'all being aware of what we do. And the bulk of it is that grants, EDA grants. I mean, that is right down the fairway for what they like to focus on and fund. Job generation, but really the public infrastructure piece that supports that. So I mentioned in the end of year report, we worked on 25 projects related to whether it's water, wastewater, drainage, or ingress, egress, and transportation. I've got 3 more that I'm working on just right now, but I'm flagging to you all that, please reach out and let us know. That's one of those more challenging pieces because some of these projects are so granular that I can't necessarily just pull out a master regional CIP for what y'all are focusing on, but I do want to start to get more strategic about that and get synced up with y'all's strategic plans. Data and tools, that was y'all's big red flag to us as far as what you all would like to see more of and improved. And, we've got some broadband data and tools that are coming out, but I wanted to just touch base as far as, are these the kinds of things that you all are looking for as far as data, analytics, reports, localized and locally available data, or are there other specific things that maybe you already know that we have, but you don't like working with it? Any feedback that you guys have on data tools and things like that I can specifically start to work on and jump into?
Hey, Jillian, this is Josh.
Yeah.
I think once we get the latest census data, if we could get some of the updates that we have incorporated in the CEDS and the economic resilience plan with updated data, I think that would be very beneficial for us. I know I harvest a lot of that information in responding to RFIs and just in our planning efforts here. So when,
Great.
I don't know when the 2020 census data will be released. And I'm sure that the team is going to be on top of it, but when it is, it'd be great to be on the forefront of getting that information in a visually stimulating format.
Sure. Yeah. That was some of my question. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
One other thing that I would just build on that, it's one thing to, and actually absolutely important, as Josh mentioned, to be, really on top of the latest data that's available, particularly with the census. since that's going to be a treasure trove of insights. But I think, you know, we all hear things around smart cities, smart counties. I'm not sure if, you know, what kind of work there's going on around smart regions. But with all this access to data and also all these tools, I'm curious as to whether or not there's any thinking or thought around, you know, a smart region initiative, what that would look like, and how could that help our group from an economic development perspective to think about incorporating or tapping AI, machine learning to actually, you know, identify trends that we may not necessarily realize that's buried in the data. So just another angle at looking at that data.
Yeah, I really like that. I have not heard of a smart region, but I don't see why, you know, the same thinking couldn't be applied. You know, part of the, I think, bias, I guess, towards being, you know, the focus on a metropolitan areas, the concentration of available data. But I definitely know that smaller towns and peri-urban communities do it too. So I like that idea a lot. And
the cool thing about it is that, you know, again, back to the point you just made, we are fairly complex because of that urban rural quote unquote divide, but also the fact that we have so much that gray area where rural and urban are mixing, and there's all kinds of dynamics happening with that there's actually a real struggle. I've talked to a lot of people who look at that kind of stuff, and they are struggling to actually identify. So what does that mean when you have that tension with high growth areas where you have that rural or urban line coming into play, and what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and how do you address some of those?
Right. Love it. Thank you. Yeah, so I definitely know the data updates, and I think also being able to sort of cull these in a way, like you mentioned, the resilience plan, at least getting down to the county level. You know, because a lot of our reports just report, here's all, you know, 13 counties in one go. And if you removed Harris County, the data would look totally different, right? So I do hear and understand too that we can help y'all provide some localized data, particularly for responding to RFIs. So you have that. And I can work in partnership with our workforce solutions team. Parker Harvey is a tremendous asset. And so I'm happy to work on that there. Great. Workforce development, the traditional tool and mechanism that we use there is, you know, through that grants and technical assistance, which means that, you know, we need to be up on where the opportunities are to support projects with grant support. And so that's another one where I think there's a sort of broader discussion that may need to be had, because it came up top of list for every single one of those questions. Y'all want more partnerships, y'all want more collaboration, I think I sense the tie-in with business retention and expansion and attraction. You know, this is really critical. And yet, you know, we have a whole separate sort of part of our agency that focuses on that. So how do we sort of bridge that divide and bring those two things together? Outside of supporting, you know, the expansion of those programs through grants, I would love to hear any input y'all have on that, and perhaps some working models in your local areas that have worked that are interesting that we should consider, or other states that you've seen, any case studies that we could look towards.
And this will be the last thing I say, simply because I don't want to be a predominant voice in today's meeting. But if you haven't seen the latest report from H-GAC's workforce report, you should get a copy of that. It was, I think it was disseminated to all H-GAC active members, but I'm not sure of that. There was some really interesting insights in that. Some of it that is actually very challenging, and actually I think is one of the reasons why workforce development was a consistent point of feedback when it comes to thinking about economic development, and the fact that most of us, when we start promoting our region, one of the first things that comes up always is about, so tell us about your labor pool, you know, how tech savvy is it, what kind of upskilling initiatives you have in place. All that is absolutely in play. And so just think it's important for us to keep that in mind, but also, how do we connect that conversation between the economic development side and the workforce development side, especially on those high growth areas, but also those that hold promise. I think, we keep talking about an innovation ecosystem that we want to build up, but I'm not sure that the conversations are actually linked up at the regional level to the employers, to the school districts in higher education. So that's one thing. And then also that there are initiatives that are being undertaken at the state level. So I don't know how many folks here on the call are familiar with Texas A&M's TEAS in program with the Department of Defense on looking at the manufacturing skills gap in Texas, and actually a series of workshops that TEAS is hosting across the state, including here in our region. If any of you are participating or have seen some information about that, I would really suggest that that be promoted and that we get some solid participation, because not only is it going to be not only is it an assessment, but it's actually also going to lead to a development of a roadmap that I think we should be a part of.
Thank you, Andrew. I made a couple notes there. So really thinking more about syncing up on the digital skills divide and other, the high growth occupations list is really smart because it syncs up well with specific industries. But what I'm hearing, and I've heard before in other communities, is the need to think about just high value skills that may cross multiple occupations and multiple industries. And it may not just be digital skills, but some folks mentioned soft skills, communications and things like that. So, there's our own workforce side, there's GHP as an upskills program where they're at least facilitating a lot of discussions, but we can definitely get synced up on that. And I'm gonna, unless anybody else has anything to say, I don't want to take up the last 5 minutes from you all. This is y'all's time. I want to make y'all feel like you all get to participate as much as you can.
Hello, Jillian. This is BJ
Sure.
Simon.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share, I mean, you did a fine job of distilling and categorizing the Gcedd's categories, but just as an opportunity for us to not look at them discretely, but to look at the interplay of these 4 categories going forward for some opportunities to broaden our thinking, in these areas, and be glad to follow up with you and to build upon the discussions we've had in the past. But there are some opportunities, I think, particularly between broadband and workforce development and data and infrastructure and the like. And so that sort of analysis, I think we maybe a subgroup in preparation for augmenting the Gcedd's going forward would be great. I'd be glad to help in that regard.
I love the silo busting mindset you have, BJ. Appreciate that, because you're spot on. One of my questions I didn't really get to talk to Tom about, but he and I talk all the time, so I figured I'd talk to him about it later, are recommendations to address that adoption and demand side. So how do we help businesses if 75% of people are using the internet to find local businesses and your local businesses aren't online, there's a gap, and we have a serious need for that right now. Particularly, that could be a lower hanging fruit as far as capacity building. So I love that thinking. And just to flag you all, I read everyone's responses word for word individually. I'm categorizing it by regions and what things you might have in common by industries. And I will be reaching out to you all. I hope you guys can get together and hopefully I do want to end sort of with a proposal that to sort of not just have me get the benefit of y'all's interesting thoughts, like what BJ and Andrew have just brought to the fore. We've already written our Gcedds, it got approved this year, but I would love to have another sort of work group discussion to sort of deepen what directions as far as thought leadership we want to go and ways to tie these things together. And perhaps before April's meeting, have a sort of action plan refinement process that happens that really gives more folks a chance to sort of take on some of these areas that may be more interesting to them or come up with ways to sort of combine them together. And so I would love to hear anybody's reaction either in the chat or verbally that would like to participate in such a meeting on the next 12 to 18 months of an action plan update. Anybody like to join me in that?
Sure, count me in.
Thanks, BJ.
Same here, and I might as well just recruit Guy Jackson since he's already serves as a bridge between economic development and workforce development too. Guy, I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
Great.
Guy doesn't have anything else to do anyway.
Anybody else like to be part of this sort of interim CEDS task force?
Absolutely. Josh Owens is in.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Anybody else? I'll give you all a chance in emails too. And I can't see the chat right now, but we'll look at that. This won't be the only time you can think about it. Go ahead.
Dane Carlson and Garrett McLeod are both interested in the chat.
Dane, Garrett, excellent. Thank y'all.
Okay. Anything else?
Cool. No, I believe that's it. And I'll send out this updated version of the survey since I had one last minute addition to make sure everybody got their voices heard.
Great.
So I think we're good.
Well, we're down to about a minute left, and we're on item number 9. What I'm going to suggest is the federal stimulus and 87th legislative session. We've got a lot of bills introduced there, the topics to them. Let's everyone look at these, read them. If you have any comments, concerns, get them to Jillian, and then she can get them out to the board of directors. And our next meeting, April the 9th, 2021. I'm gonna have more gray hair. That happens to be my birthday. Was that on purpose, or
is that right? It is. It's just for you, Judge.
Probably have a cane coming to that one. Okay. Looking for that. Is there anything else, comments for the good of the Gulf Coast Economic Development District?
Judge, if I can add about the upcoming legislative session.
Yes, sir.
This is going to be one that we have never seen before with COVID in place. Yeah. The access to the Capitol is going to be limited. Yep. The House and the Senate cannot not even agree on the rules on access. Yep. So if you're going to go see a state rep or go testify at a House hearing, you have to have a COVID test to get in the door. But if you go do it in the Senate, you don't have a COVID test. These are still being worked out. Just want to let everybody know that testifying this session is going to be much different than it has ever been.
Yep, I agree, and just shows us, man, we're so glad that our representatives in Austin got it all together. Wow. Anyway, if nothing else, then I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. You guys have a great week and a great rest of the month. Talk to you later. Oh, Jillian, we're adjourned. I'm going to ask you now, all the slides and everything is on. They're going to be on the website so we can get them, or are you going to email them to everyone?
All of the above will be sent out to you guys. It will be online, and I'll make sure y'all have them.
Great. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.